Hey guys, welcome back to Intelligent Faith 315. This is Pastor Jay. So good to be with you. As you can see behind me, we're continuing on with part 5 of our lesson, Has Science Eliminated the Need for God? Now this is such an important and vital question. Has science eliminated the need for God? I'm just going to jump right into this today. We've been discussing, we just finished up the first point of our lesson, which was that the scientific founding fathers of this modern scientific revolution we happen to find ourselves in, the vast majority of the scientific founding fathers happen to be Christian theists for the most part, or deists. So as you'll remember, we are claiming that there are at least 5 reasons why science has not eliminated the need for God. Number 1 would be the scientific founding fathers, as we said, that for a large part, the majority of them, they were largely Christians and theists, but some of them, like Albert Einstein, which we left off with last time, was a deist. And today we're going to be continuing on with Scientism, that this is a self-defeating and self-contradictory idea. I do encourage you to come back for all 5 points. We happen to find ourselves in the 5th episode of this lesson, but we're only on the 2nd point. So I do encourage you to join us for all of them. So as I said, we covered that scientific founding fathers, in many areas of modern science, they were founded and pioneered by Christians and believers in God. The men that we discussed rather, and I do encourage you to review these previous episodes and to do some research on your own. An interesting book, if you'd like to check it out, very cheap book. It's called Men of Science, Men of God by Henry Morris, Dr. Henry Morris. And we spoke about Plato and Aristotle, Leonardo da Vinci. We spoke about Nicholas Copernicus, his discovery of heliocentricity, Galileo Galilei, his contributions to astronomy, Isaac Newton and his Newtonian physics, the laws of motion, universal gravitation, theory of light, Louis Pasteur, the father of modern science and bacteriology. We talked about Francis Bacon, his contribution of discovering, amongst many other things, developing the modern scientific method. Johannes Kepler, German mathematician and astronomer. Robert Boyle and his gas laws, but also a theologian and a chemist. James Clerk Maxwell, a physicist, mathematician, and his contributions to electromagnetic theory. Michael Faraday, a chemist, physicist, and philosopher who, with James Clerk Maxwell, developed modern electromagnetic theory. And as you can see, the inventor of the battery. Baron Kelvin, mathematical physicist and engineer. And lastly, we ended with Albert Einstein, hailed by many as one of the greatest scientific thinkers of all time and the father of modern physics. All of those men, which we discussed, are believers in a God, a creator, a designer of the world. The vast majority of those guys, almost all of them, I believe, except Albert Einstein, were Christian theists, a believer in the Christian worldview, the Christian classical concept of God, that he is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and then Albert Einstein, as we said, was a deist. He believed that God existed and was the creator, but he wasn't attached and personally involved in the world. But he did believe in a creator and a designer of the world and of the cosmos. So again, do encourage you to incorporate that into your understanding of this whole debate, this question, has science killed the concept of God? Has science eliminated God? These great men of science, these pillars of the modern scientific movement would say no, that science is not antagonistic. Science is complementary to belief in God. And as Lord Kelvin said, and I encourage you to watch the episodes on the scientific founding fathers, Lord Kelvin said that in his scientific opinion, the only sufficient explanation for the origin of life and the complexity of life is creative power, a creator God. And Lord Kelvin said that on a scientific basis alone, that the idea of atheism to him was nonsensical. So if you are watching this as an atheist, a naturalist, a materialist, a skeptic, don't get offended by that, please. But I do encourage you to take into account these great men of science, and surely they know more about the scientific disciplines than you or I do, and yet they firmly believe that science was a pathway to understanding the mechanics of how the Creator did it. Factor that into your own research. Don't just read the books by Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris and these guys, but look also at these great men of science and see some things from their perspective. I really do encourage you to check that out for yourself. Today, we're going to go on to reason 2, and this is all we're going to cover for today, but this is one of the most important lessons, that scientism is a self-defeating idea. Now, hopefully you know what scientism is. It is not science. Science is from the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge. Scientism is not science. Scientism, as you can see behind me, is essentially the claim that only those things which can be proven by scientific methods are true. Okay? And we are claiming that this is going to contradict its own standards. Now listen, any idea, any claim that contradicts or violates its own criteria for knowledge, its own standards, is what we would call a self-defeating, self-contradictory, or self-stultifying idea. Any self-defeating idea cannot be true. You understand this, right? And so whether we are atheist or theist or whatever worldview you take as a viewer here, a self-defeating, self-contradictory, self-stultifying idea cannot be true. So let me just ask you, before we continue here, would you agree with that statement of scientism? Do you hold the opinion that only those things which can be proven true by scientific methods are meaningful, are true? In other words, do you only believe that a truth claim that can be expressed in the language of science, let's say physics, chemistry, or mathematics, that only those kind of ideas can give us meaningful information about reality? You as the viewer, do you hold to that idea, that opinion? If you do, then this episode is for you, and you need to really pay attention, listen to what I'm saying, analyze it, and then examine your own beliefs. Because if that idea you hold to if that really is the idea that you hold to, but that idea turns out to be self-contradictory, then you're going to have to make some changes. You're going to have to make a decision. Are you going to hold on to a self-contradictory, self-defeating idea, or are you going to release it and jettison it for something else that's a little more rational and logical? Okay? So let's examine this claim that scientism is a self-defeating idea. Okay, a self-defeating statement, obviously, is one that refutes itself, okay? It would be an irrational idea, okay? So let me give you some examples. So a self-defeating statement, one that refutes itself, for example, if someone says, I can't speak a word of English, well, the problem with that is that you just did. You just spoke a word of English. That's a self-defeating idea. I know this is basic, but just humor me. Also, no sentence is longer than 3 words. Well, that sentence is longer than 3 words. You can't be sure of anything in life. Are you sure of that statement? You can't be sure of anything. Are you sure about that? And then, of course, you shouldn't judge people. Isn't that your judgment? Isn't it your judgment that you shouldn't judge other people? Or as you can see over here, nothing is written in stone. Well, that statement happens to be written in stone. So these are good examples of just kind of humorous and silly self-defeating ideas. A self-defeating statement is one that refutes itself. One person has said that a self-defeating statement is one that slits its own throat, or it is one that cannot satisfy its own standard, its own criteria for truth. It can't meet up to its own standard. Now, what are some self-defeating statements regarding reality and truth? Let's go through this real quick, because you, as the viewer, you may hold to some of these self-defeating, self-contradictory ideas as well. What would some of these be? Well, you should doubt everything. Some people hold to this idea of absolute hardcore skepticism. And we've done some episodes in the past about truth where we address absolute hard skepticism. Some people say you should doubt everything. What question should follow? Do you doubt that? If someone says you should doubt everything, well, do you doubt that you should doubt everything? It's a self-defeating idea. Also, everything is relative. There is no truth. Question, is that statement true? Everything is relative. There's no truth. Is that statement true? The idea of relativism is self-defeating. The idea of absolute hardcore skepticism is self-defeating. Also, someone would say, there is no right or wrong. Okay? Is it wrong that I disagree with you? Someone who is a moral relativist who would say there is no right or wrong, then you could ask them a question, well, is it wrong that I disagree with you? Because they would say, yeah, it's wrong, but it's self-contradictory. It's a self-defeating idea. And then also, no one has the truth about God, and the question you should ask is that true? So This is interesting. Self-defeating statements regarding reality and truth. You really need to examine these claims. And again, I encourage you to go look at the episodes that we did on truth. That absolute truth exists and it is knowable. And these other ideas of skepticism, agnosticism, postmodernism, relativism, and pluralism, these are different approaches to truth, and they are self-defeating and self-contradictory. Really, any theory of truth outside of the correspondence theory of truth, that truth is the thing that corresponds to reality. Truth is that which matches its object. Any other theory of truth outside of that, the sincerest theory, a coherence theory, these other theories of truth, they fall to the floor. A relativistic theory, etc. So it's very interesting and important to have a grasp on this, these self-defeating statements regarding reality and truth. And my friend, if you hold to hardcore skepticism, hardcore relativism, if you're a moral relativist, if you are a nihilist, if you think that there is no truth, etc., these are self-defeating claims about truth. Well, what about this claim regarding scientific knowledge of scientism? Again, scientism claims this, that only things which can be proven by scientific methods are true. Only things which can be demonstrated or proven by scientific methods. In other words, if you can quantify it, if you can express it with the language of physics or chemistry, only then can it be accepted. Only then is it meaningful. But now let's examine that statement. Does it meet its own criteria for knowledge? Does it satisfy its own standards? Can it meet up to it? Question. Can the truth of that statement, right here, can the truth of that statement be measured in a laboratory? Can you weigh it in a scale? No. Can you test it through chemistry? No, of course you cannot. Can we use the laws of physics to evaluate it? Can you touch it, taste it, measure it, or see the truth of that idea? No, you cannot. And so it is simply this, that the claim of scientism is a self-defeating, self-contradictory idea. Because the truth of that statement cannot itself be verified through scientific methods. Do you understand that? I understand why you as the viewer might think that only truth about reality that is expressed in science is meaningful or legitimate. But if you really analyze it, that's a self-defeating way to think, because the truth of this statement cannot itself be verified through scientific means. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that if you subscribe to this type of thinking, it is a self-defeating, self-contradictory idea, and you as the viewer actually believe many, many things that cannot be verified through scientific ways or scientific methods. And if you just investigate that, you'll see that it's true. You probably believe in some type of morality. That can't really be verified through scientific investigation. You probably believe in things like love. You probably believe in your memories. You probably believe in the existence of an external physical world. And none of those things, including the existence of the external physical world around you, can be verified or proven through science. And if you don't believe me, just do some reading in philosophy, okay? How do you know that you're not living in the matrix and this is not some grand simulation? You can never get beyond your sensory data, your input. It could be fake. It could all be an illusion. It could all be a simulation. But you see, there are many things that we do accept as true, though we cannot verify them through this type of criteria of knowledge. So, scientism, the claim that only ideas that can be verified through the language of science, namely physics or mathematics or biology or chemistry, if it cannot be verified through those methods, that truth is unacceptable, that idea, that claim of knowledge and truth is self-defeating. As we've covered in previous episodes, this type of idea, this type of statement about knowledge is very similar to an old idea called verificationism. Verificationism. And just Google that idea, go to Wikipedia, do some research on this idea of verificationism. It was essentially the very same idea that only claims about reality were acceptable or meaningful if they were true by definition or if they could be verified by your senses. And that idea of verificationism was abandoned in the university because philosophers finally realized that verificationism was self-defeating. It was also called logical positivism. Logical positivism and verificationism are very similar to scientism. And all of them are self-defeating, all of them are self-contradictory, and none of them can meet their own criteria for knowledge. So, my friend, listen. Don't only take into consideration the input and the weight of the scientific founding fathers as to the existence of God and this idea of science being complementary or contradictory to God's existence, but also analyze for yourself, in the area of science, do you hold to the claim of scientism? It is a self-defeating idea. That's all we have time for today. We're going to continue on with part 6 of this lesson next time. I encourage you to come back and join us.